Joining me here at the Precious Metals Summit at Beaver Creek, I've got Tony Giardini from Trilogy Metals. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Oh, great to be here and having a great time here at Beaver Creek.
So I'd say maybe a couple days into the conference here, and one thing I like to ask people I talk to at this conference is, what's the buzz? What are you hearing when you're having conversations with some of your colleagues or investors? What's the sentiment out there?
Well, I think people are generally pretty pleased with the commodity prices that we're seeing in the space, whether it's gold or base metals. I think a question that's coming from a lot of the corporates, particularly more in the junior mining space, is just the level of interest in the stories and the equity stories in particular. We all appreciate that the larger producing companies have to replace their production and their ounces and pounds of copper, et cetera. And so we're seeing a number of those companies here looking for new projects or opportunities. So I think people are quite interested in that. And it's always about connecting with colleagues past and present and connecting with investors. And that's the buzz. In some respects, it feels like, here we are in early September. It's like going back to school, the beginning of a new school year.
So it's the first time we've got to chat with you before. For our audience new to the story, what's the high-level overview for the company?
Yeah, Trilogy is an interesting story. We're focused on a VMS project and another advanced exploration project in the great state of Alaska. These are assets or exploration deposits that have been well known and explored for a long time. There's over 200,000 meters of drilling that's been done in the district. We've got a feasibility study out on our advanced project called Arctic, and we have another project called Bornite that we're going to be releasing a PEA on later this year. We have a large partner in South 32. South 32 is a Perth-based base metal company that is a large producing company. They've invested about $200 million into our story, whether it's at the JV level where we have a JV on these projects or in the company directly or for exploration purposes. Our biggest challenge really is not the geology, it's not the exploration potential, it's not the grade, because we have a very high grade project. It's really about permitting in the US, and we sort of fallen prey to some of the delays that unfortunately happen in US permitting. So we're hoping to work our way through that and get back on track.
So the Ambler Road story is something that I think anybody who follows junior mining is somewhat interested in. You guys have what I would deem one of the more attractive projects out there, 35 million metric tons at nearly 3% copper is...
Yeah, I think it's actually higher than that. It's more like 45 million tons at 4 and change on a copper equivalent basis. So, it's a great project. This is, if it's not the best VMS deposit out there, it's pretty damn close. The issue is really about this road, and just, for people that are new to the story, I'll give a bit of color on the road. The road is what would allow us to move the project forward in development. And it's been it's been planned for a long time, but the process really got underway in 2015. And the development of a road is being spearheaded by an agency of the state government in Alaska called ADA. And ADA is actually very familiar with mining. They built the road and the port to the Red Dog mine, which is the largest zinc mine in the world. And Red Dog is just north of where our project is. So we've got a partner that is very familiar with the mining space. They've invested in infrastructure in the past. They've done it very successfully, recovered their investment. And what we're really arguing over is not the state and their support, but it's really the federal government, which manages about 25 miles of a 211-mile road. So we're working through the process. It's certainly been I'd like to say a windy road. That might not be the best pun to use in this case, but it's been a bit of a challenge over the last year, but we're still hopeful that there's a path to get the road back on track, and that then we can really focus on what's important, which is the geology and the potential for developing Arctic as a standalone mine, and then looking for other exploration and opportunities in the district.
Okay, so for context, we've got this huge project we're trying to get a road built, and there's some permitting issues with having that road built. What are those issues?
Yeah, so the road, firstly, the road is being built by the state of Alaska. It's not being built by ourselves. It's being permitted by the state of Alaska. And a permit was issued in 2020 by the federal government, effectively giving the state agency the ability to move a road forward. And as often happens in these cases, there was litigation that followed from environmental and NGO groups, mostly outside of the state of Alaska. As that litigation moved forward, there was a change in the federal government in November of 2020. So I would say that the federal government generally was supportive of getting the permit back on track. But unfortunately, I think we ran into the election timing of what we're in right now, which is an election that's going to be held in November of this year. So the decision was made by the federal government to effectively take no action with the next phase of the study work that was done. And so we need to sort of see how that plays itself out to get the road back on track so that we can focus on building the road and then looking at the development of the infrastructure to build the mine.
Now, I hate to put you on the spot here, but does the upcoming election have any kind of bearing for investors watching?
It certainly does, and I'm not going to speculate as to how it would play out for us under certain scenarios. It's not one way or the other. I think there's a number of different factors. It's not just going to be who the president of the U.S. is going to be. It's going to be who controls the Senate, who controls the House of Representatives. Those will be the key factors. And then I think it also is going to come down to the commitment that you're going to have for whoever forms a government with respect to critical metals and domestic supply of metals. And I think both parties, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, have talked about the need for domestic supply of critical metals. And the metals that we have in the Ambler mining district fit nicely into that. There's obviously copper, zinc, cobalt, lead, germanium, silver, and gold, and a number of those are deemed critical metals for purposes of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I don't think that it really is one party or the other. It's really about who's ever forming government focusing on this critical metal strategy and some of what we've already seen being discussed, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. And as I said, getting back on track.
So let's just say that this road can get built. What does the timeline to production look like?
Yeah, it's a ways out. I would say that if everything sort of fell into place, like if the issues on the permitting of a road were resolved fairly quickly, and then we'd still have a mine permitting process to go through, but that's at a state level. I think at the earliest that we could really target for production would probably be somewhere around 2028, 2029. We have a great partner in South 32. As I said, they've invested a significant amount of money into the project on the basis that we're looking at developing a district, not just a mine. So I think if we had, green lights going forward, my view would be we could get moving quite quickly. For the company itself, just give a bit of color on what the valuation looks like, just so that people appreciate our story. We're listed on Toronto and New York under ticker symbol TMQ. Our market cap in U.S. dollars is roughly about $80 million. From the high was in when the permit was granted and the feasibility came out. That was probably about $450 million. So it gives you a sense of what the impact that we've had on that has occurred with respect to the uncertainty on the road. We're sitting on about $26 million in cash in the corporate entity and about $11 million in the JV. So we're not in a position where we're going to run out of money anytime soon. Probably 10 investors control 60% of the stock. So we've got some great supporters. Electrum and Polson own about 30% of the stock. South 32 is in there for 11%. Management, including myself and the board and former CEO, own about 9% of the stock. I've been taking all of my compensation since March of 2022 in equity. So I'm fully invested and I'm fully aligned with shareholders in terms of this story. I like to say that I'm buying the stock every single day because effectively I am. So I really believe that this project has a lot of upside and opportunity, and I think we'll work through the challenges that we're facing. They are challenges, but they're not insurmountable, and I think there's a path to get there.
So you mentioned JV partner. How much of the project do you guys own?
Yeah, so the Ambler Mining District is roughly 190,000 hectares, so that's a JV area, and it's a 50-50 JV with South 32. They contributed $145 million into the JV to get a 50% interest, and we also have a native partner, being NANA, which is a for-profit native corporation, which its shareholders live in the area, and some of the land is NANA land. But we have a 50% direct interest in the JV. South 32 has a 50% direct interest. It's a pure JV. The decisions have to be agreed on by both parties. No party can override the other in terms of our decisions. I would say our working relationship with South 32 has been very positive, and I expect it to continue. So I feel like we're in a really good space. And the point that I would make about having a partner like South 32, the technical due diligence on the project has happened. South 32 did not come in here and invest $200 million because they're worried about, because they're not comfortable with geology or upside or story or scale or any of those things. That's happened. The challenge for us now is to get through these permitting issues on the road, get the project itself permitted, and then put ourselves in a position where we can leverage a great initial discovery in Arctic into district potential in the longer term.
Okay, Tony, last question for you. If I am an investor watching, or I'm a potential investor who finds the story really interesting, what am I looking out for over the remainder of the year?
Well, you talked about the election. I think the election will be important. I'd like to think that it's going to be, we're going to be able to work with whichever parties are in charge of, that are going to be in the White House or at the Senate or House of Representatives. That's going to be, something to watch. I think the other thing that should be upcoming is sometime in October, possibly early November, we'll have a preliminary economic assessment with respect to Bornite. Bornite's a separate project out in the area of interest, but about 20 miles away from Arctic. It's 200 million tons at about 1.46% copper with cobalt, and there's about 33 million tons at 3.5% copper. And so what we're looking at is, can we take that 33 million tons, process it through the Arctic mill on the back end of the Arctic project, and go from an asset or a mine that has a potential of being 14-year mine life to roughly 30-year mine life. So I think that that's going to be very important for a lot of reasons, because it will really underpin what we've been talking about, which is the district potential of where we are.
So the Bornite project, if I'm understanding it correctly, is also sort of dependent on the road?
They're both dependent on the road. Bornite is roughly 20 miles away from the Arctic deposit, and the way it's set up is that the road would benefit both of us. And by the way, the road isn't just focused on our projects. It would also focus on development of other projects within within the district. And lastly, I would point out that the politicians in the state of Alaska are very supportive. So we have a support of Governor Dunleavy, Senators Murkowski and Sullivan, and Congresswoman Patola. They've all been on record of supporting the road and the process for moving the project forward with a view of developing mines in the district.
Well, Tony, I think you've got one of the most interesting stories in junior mining. I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here in front of me. I love bets where you've got this great asset and it's kind of binary. You guys get that to the finish line. I think investors are going to do really, really well here. And as a junior mining investor, I think that those are really interesting stories. And I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with us.
No, and thanks for having us. And I encourage everyone to go to our website, have a look at the information there, and feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer any questions to the extent we can. And I agree with you 100%. We've got a great story, and I think we'll work towards resolving some of the issues that are out there.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thanks again.